Sahaba, the guiding stars.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. For those of you, Jazakallah khairan for that introduction again. I said this previously as well, that when people have goodness in their life, they look at the good of others. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the goodness of our hearts and to allow us to look at the good of others, inshaAllah, and allow us to keep our hearts clean for each other, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put love and muhabbah for each and every one of us, inshaAllah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, nahmaduhu wa nusalli ala rasulih al-kareem, amma ba'd. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي رب يسر ولا تؤسر وتممه لنا بالخير يا فتاه يا فتاه يا فتاح قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في القرآن المجيد والفرقان الحميد والسابقون الأولون من المهاجرين والأنصار والذين اتبعوهم بإحسان رضي الله عنهم ورضوا عنه صدق الله العظيم. Respected brothers and elders, mothers and sisters in Islam, truly it is an immense mercy, infinite karam, and absolute blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon all of us, that we have gathered us, He has gathered us, invited us, and brought us together in this very, very beloved, beautiful, and blessed night. That we are sitting in the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to listen, to reflect, to understand, and to comprehend the life of those individuals were the best of the souls and individuals to walk on the face of this earth after the Anbiya and the Prophets. And I'm truly glad and I'm truly thankful for all of you to be a part of this gathering for such a long time. MashaAllah, you guys were present yesterday. Many of you brothers and sisters are present here again. Sometimes as small children, I know how difficult that becomes. But to free up an entire weekend just so that you can learn, reflect, and understand the life of individuals that we achieve and we strive and we hope to achieve the footsteps of these individuals is truly a blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah reward you and bless you and your families for being a part of this program in any way that you can. And indeed, it is the talab and the desire of you which will allow us to speak in the manner what is most pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I remember 2 years back I was in Hajj. With the blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I was sitting in the tents of Mina. I was told that there's a Sheikh, Sheikh al-Hadith from one of the institutions in Pakistan in Multan. He's in one of the tents. So that's your desire to meet all the shuyukh, the ulama of the time, just so that you can do their ziyarah. So I finally found a place where he was and I got there to sit very close to him. He hadn't started at that moment. So someone asked him, Sheikh, can you give us some nasiyat? As anyone would say to a scholar and alim which was present. So very open, he said, bhai kyun nahi? He said, why not? So I felt like, why would he say that? You know, sometimes you say no with humbleness, with tawabu, and you say, brother, I can't give no nasiyat. So he openly said, yeah, why not? So I felt that for what reason he said that. Allahu Akbar. The things that he said that, it's still engraved in my heart. He says, it is not the fadl or the blessings of those who give nasiha, but it is the fadl and the blessings of those who seek and ask for nasiha. He said, our example is like the well. The well itself does no favor to those who need water. It is the favor of those who are pulling out the water from the well. That if you don't pull out the water from the well, the old water will stay there. And if you don't pull out that water, the fresh water will never gush out from the well itself. The essence of a well is the more you pull, the fresher the water will be. So he says the ihsan is not that I'm telling you something. It's an ihsan of you that you are listening to the words of Allah and His Rasul. It is a favor of Allah upon you that you are listening to the words of Allah and His Rasul, Allah's qasam. People could have been anywhere. The families, the brothers or the sisters and their children could have demanded their parents to be anywhere at this moment. But for them to free up their time, Allah's qasam, this is an inam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إِنَّمَا يَأْمُرُ مَسَاجِدَ اللَّهِ مَنْ آمَنَ بِاللَّهِ. From amongst the signs of iman upon Allah and His Rasul on the day of Qiyamah is the presence of yours in the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah increase that manifold for each and every one of us, and of course all of you as well. The ayah of the Quran that I recited in front of you, and from the previous 3 sessions that we have been speaking about personally, and of course you put me in a spot which is very, very difficult. Sometimes you put me after, when you have to speak about after very good speakers and very knowledgeable individuals, and what a beautiful nasheed. I love the words, you brother, and give you much more. It's very hard to convey the message, but I will try my utmost. The ayah of the Quran that I shared with you is a portion of the verse of the Quran from chapter number 9, verse number 100. Very easy to remember. Chapter number 9, which is Surah Tawbah. It's verse number 100 exactly. This is a portion of an ayat of the Quran that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala defines to us. What a grand saying. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says so eloquently, so beautifully. And Allah's qasam, there is no word, there is no kalam more eloquent than the kalam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That the shu'ara and the poets of the times of Arabia, which were known to be the most eloquent of the individuals in Arabic language, had to throw down their pens and close their books, and they had to admit that this is not a kalam of the human being. That this is indeed the kalam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is not possible for an individual to put such eloquence in such words, such as Surah Hud. There's an ayat of the Quran in Surah Hud. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يَا أَرْضُ ابْلَئِي مَاءَكَ وَيَا سَمَاءُ أَقْلِهِ وَغِيضَ الْمَاءُ وَقُضِيَ الْأَمْرُ وَاسْتَوَتْ عَلَى الْجُودِيِّ وَقِيلَ بُعْدًا لِلْقَوْمِ الظَّالِمِينَ. This ayat of the Quran has 19 words and 21 Arabic grammatical rules inside of itself. 19 words and 21 grammatical rules inside of this ayat of the Quran. So when the Arabs of the time heard this, they ripped their works. And they said, we can never compare anything equal to the works that you have brought, which is the kalam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So very eloquently and very beautifully, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala defines to us a statement. This is Surah number 9, Surah Tawbah, verse number 100. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَالسَّابِقُونَ الْأَوَّلُونَ مِنَ الْمُهَاجِرِينَ وَالْأَنصَارِ وَالَّذِينَ اتَّبَعُوهُم بِالْإِحْسَانِ رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنْهُمْ وَرَضُوا عَنْهُ. Allahu Akbar. Only if we understood the eloquence of Arabic itself, the kalam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And wallahi, even the Arabs of the time who did not accept Iman, they would hide from the Nabi of Allah and the Sahaba, and they would listen to the kalam and they would shed tears, knowing that this is such a magnificent book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And amongst the signs of Iman is that those who hear about Allah, wajidat qulub, their hearts begin to tremble, their eyes begin to tear. This is the sign of Iman of an individual. If this is not happening to us when listening to the Quran, brothers and sisters, we need to go get a checkup for ourselves, truly, not that literal checkup, but for ourselves, to realize that what's happening to me if the Quran is not affecting me in such a manner. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in this ayat of the Quran, and He says, وَالسَّابِقُونَ الْأَوَّلُونَ مِنَ الْمُهَاجِرِينَ وَالْأَنصَارِ. And the first and the foremost in faith, meaning those who admitted faith, as our beloved and honorable and respected and knowledgeable Shaykh Mufti Farhan was mentioning this point related to Khadija al-Kubra radiallahu anha, that when Aisha radiallahu anha, I'm going to repeat what he had said, that when Aisha radiallahu anha, the most beloved of the wives of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, had asked about Khadija al-Kubra radiallahu anha, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam replied, as Mufti Sahib mentioned, that he said that indeed she was that one who believed in me when no one believed in me. She trusted me when no one trusted me. And she gave me when no one gave me. And Allah granted me all of my 6 children from Khadija radiallahu anha. So the ayat of the Quran said, وَالسَّابِقُونَ الْأَوَّلُونَ. Those individuals in the beginning of the time. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, for indeed Allah sent me with haqq. And every individual belied me except for Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. For every man thought twice about accepting my words. They said, give us time, let us think, thinking for a little bit. But there was no other man except for Abu Bakr as-Siddiq who said, you tell the truth, indeed you are the Nabi of Allah. وَالسَّابِقُونَ الْأَوَّلُونَ. From amongst the individuals who were the first and the foremost to bring Iman and let go of the evil and wrong. مِنَ الْمُهَاجِرِينَ وَالْأَنصَارِ. And amongst the 2 classes of Sahaba, and there's no other class of Sahaba, amongst the differentiations of ulama, that there's no other class of Sahaba except for those who were Muhajirin and those who were Ansar, those who had left their houses for the propagation of the deen of Allah and His Rasul, and for those who served everything that they had for those who left their houses. And Allah's qasam, these were the individuals that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had taken the verse of the Quran, وَالَّذِينَ اتَّبَعُوهُم بِالْإِحْسَانِ. and those who followed with good conduct, meaning those who followed along afterwards amongst the Sahaba in that same manner amongst those in the earlier time. What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said? رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنْهُمْ وَرَضُوا عَنْهُ. Allah is pleased with them and they are pleased with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this ayat of the Quran benchmarks the topic of ours. If you have seen the itinerary of our program, so the session for this right now is known as Sahaba radiyallahu anhum. So the aspect of radiyallahu anhum, what made this title become a part of the life of these individuals? Who were the Sahaba and how they achieved such a climax? And I had mentioned this in my previous session after Dhuhr, and that was the last thing that I left off for those who were present. So because I wanted to continue on further, that it is mentioned in the ahadith of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu that from amongst the greatest, and for those who are present, this is just a reminder, for those who are not, is something for us to understand. That amongst the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that the people of Jannah will receive. Ahlul Jannah, from amongst the blessings that the people of Jannah will receive, the highest and the greatest and the climax of it is what? The sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's nothing greater than the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's nothing which can reach to the magnitude of the blessings of the sight of Allah in Jannah. There's nothing. And at that time, there's the message that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you is the climax of all the messages. And according to the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the message that this ummah will receive, or the people of Jannah will receive, is the pleasure of Allah. The rida of Allah with the people of Jannah. That, oh, the people of Jannah, I'm pleased with you and I will never be, unpleased with you. That title, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestowed upon the companions of Rasulullah. They received this title before they left the face of this earth. And that's why it is aqidah. It is from amongst the creed of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah that Sahaba kulluhum adul. That we can never say anything against the words of Sahaba radiallahu anhum ajma'in. They were all adul. They must have made mistakes. They might have made wrongs. But they were those who were forgiven by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Indeed, our tongues cannot utter a word against Sahaba radiallahu anhum ajma'in. Their mistakes were such that Allah Himself forgave. Be it those individuals who were involved in times of Uhud, individuals who had done something which was not at the time, appropriate. But indeed, we have nothing to say against Sahaba. They were all forgiven by Allah. They were all those that Allah was pleased with, and they were pleased by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they were the greatest of the individuals to ever tread the face of this earth. So now, when we hear the word Sahaba, such as when we hear the words of Bilal al-Habshi radiallahu anhu, the warmth of our bodies as we feel the heat of Makkah going through the body of Bilal al-Habshi radiallahu anhu, as we see and smiles begin to come to our faces, thinking and pondering over Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, playing in the kittens of the courtyards of the Masjid of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, bringing this thought of happiness and joy, and seeing how the Nabi of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to race with his wife in the sand deserts of Mecca and Medina itself, and the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Sahaba. All of that comes in front of us and makes us realize that what made these individuals such individuals, that they were men and women, they were poor and rich, they were slave and free, but what made these individuals reach that level, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had to test and mention in the ayat of the Quran, that Allah is pleased with them and they are pleased with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What had caused the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum ajma'in to reach this level? As they say, how from zero all the way towards the level of being the heroes? What made them? And of course, if you ever study history, history is a proof that you will know that in the time of Jahiliyyah, Sahaba radiallahu anhum ajma'in were such people, individuals prior to accepting Islam, that there was no government or individuals who wanted to govern these people because of their habits, their ignorance in Jahiliyyah which was inside of them. Umar radiallahu anhu defines this very beautifully. Umar radiallahu anhu in the time of his Khilafah, and of course his Khilafah, I mentioned this in our first session, 10 years and 6 months, was one of the greatest achievements of the Muslims. So many things happened at that time. Umar radiallahu anhu one day told the Sahaba to make an announcement in the streets of Medina, as-salatu jami'atun, which means to gather in the masjid. That was the announcement of the time. So everyone started gathering in the masjid of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He ascended the pulpit. The pulpit of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had 3 steps. Reminds me of a story in Nafatul Arab our ulama would know this. Um, they said, this is just a side story. I'm just sidetracking from the story of Umar radiallahu anhu. So it is in Nafatul Arab, they said that some people came and they accused Uthman radiallahu anhu. Some of the haters. There was a lot of conflicts in this ummah at the time. Because even Uthman radiallahu anhu, Umar radiallahu anhu, both were assassinated. But their assassinations were different. And that's a whole topic to itself, which needs a lot of background, a lot of research, a lot of understanding. But there's one main concept to understand, that the assassination of Umar radiallahu anhu was in the hands of a disbeliever, Majusi. And the assassination of Uthman radiallahu anhu was in the hand of a man who called himself a Muslim. So that's how the whole difference in the ummah started. So there were some individuals who accused Uthman radiallahu anhu for some false things. So amongst one of the things that they told him is that when Rasulullah was alive, he used to give khutbah, he used to sit on the first step of the minbar. When Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu became the Khalifa, he said, I'm not worthy of sitting on the place of the Prophet ﷺ, I will sit on his footsteps. So he would sit on the second. When Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anhu became the Khalifa, he said, I'm not worthy of sitting in the place of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. I will sit on the footsteps where he used to sit. So he sat on the third step, all the way at the bottom. When Uthman radiallahu anhu came, and he became the Khalifa, he sat all the way on the top. So he said, oh Uthman, what's wrong with you? Why did you do this? That means that this is against the respect and dignity and honor. So Uthman radiallahu anhu was a very intelligent man. So Uthman radiallahu anhu said, my brother, if this continues, near the day of the Qiyamah, the Imam will be few stories down and the Musallis will be up in the masjid. If this continuously goes on, near the day of Qiyamah, the Imam, mashallah, will be there. They're already down there, but anyways, there'll be a few floors down, mashallah. They'll be down and the masjid will be on the top. So, subhanAllah, Uthman radiallahu anhu, an amazing individual. Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anhu, he gathered the people in the masjid of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He ascended the minbar of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And another dalil that there were 3 steps. You remember the famous hadith, every Ramadan you hear this. Ameen, Ameen, Ameen. 3 Ameens, 3 steps. Anyways, so coming back to this hadith. Umar radiallahu anhu, and forget my anyways. That's the Brooklyn way. So now what happens is, the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Umar radiallahu anhu gathers the people. And Umar radiallahu anhu said, I want to make an announcement to all of you. I want to tell you one thing. That Umar was disgraced, Allah honored him. He's saying about his own son. He's saying Umar was disgraced, Allah honored him. He said, there was a time upon me that I used to graze the camels for my family. And I would come back at night and my family members would push me. And they would say, Umru, not even the complete name of his. As something as a little Umar. And they would say, you don't even know how to graze sheep. You will have no worth in your life. You will have no capabilities in your life. And then Umar radiallahu anhu said, Allah has made me the Khalifa, the commander of the believers over the land of 2.2 square million miles on the face of this earth. 22 provinces on the face of this earth under the command of a man known as Umar bin Khattab. Months of distance, the enemies are in awe and they are in fear on hearing the name of Umar bin Khattab. And then he said a statement that I would like to mention to you. He said, and I want you to note this in your hearts. He said, we are people whom Allah has honored with Islam. And if we seek honor in other than it, Allah will humiliate us again. This is the statement of Umar bin Khattab. And I say this from the words of a man that Rasulullah said, this is the transition, this is the transition of the Sahaba. They are telling us that from the deepest portions of dhillah and disgrace, how Allah took them to the level of radiyallahu anhu. How Allah took them to the climax, the pinnacle, the excellence of humanity. This is what is mentioning by Umar bin Khattab radiyallahu anhu. And I repeat this. He says, we are a people whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has honored with Islam. Inna Allah azza wa jal, a'azzana Allah bil Islam. Allah has given us respect and dignity because and with Islam. And if we seek and other than this, then indeed Allah will humiliate us. If we leave Islam, if we leave Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if we leave His Rasul, then indeed we will be humiliated on the face of this earth. And brothers and sisters, I don't have to go further in the topic of how the humiliation has come upon this ummah. I don't have to further elaborate. Every one of you is intelligent enough to know what has happened to the ummah. For those who used to lead the caravans of the ummah towards righteousness are those which are slaughtered everywhere on the face of this earth, and no one even looks towards them. The extent of humility, the humiliation upon the ummah is such that no one even cares for the aspects of the life of a believer. But there was a time in which Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anhu said that even if a dog was to die thirsty in the Khilafah of Umar bin Khattab, I will be questioned by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Indeed, a time will come upon this ummah that a woman will begin to walk from Sana'a all the way towards Medina. Hadith of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, 2 months of distance, not even eye, single evil eye will be uplifted upon this woman. The time of such tranquility, such izzat and respect and dignity was given to the believers. For what reason? What made Sahaba radiallahu anhum ajma'in? What made these individuals to reach to the level of this climax? I want to mention a little bit prior to the life of the beginning of Sahaba, and then turn towards the aspect of radiallahu anhum ajma'in. The Arabs in the time of Rasulullah ﷺ were on the climax of Jahiliyyah. And this is also a topic to itself, which needs an entire whole session to itself. That how idols, how al-asnam came inside al-Kaaba. This is an entire topic to itself. And this is something very important for our brothers and sisters to learn and to understand, that how the change came in the deen of Ibrahim alayhi salam and Ismail alayhi salam. Millat Ibrahim, which was the cleanest and the purest of the religion, which was established by the foundations and the sacrifice of the Anbiya and the prophets and their children. How did al-asnam and idols ended up in the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? They said that the first idol which was brought in the Kaaba was named Hubal. Hubal was the first idol which was brought inside the Kaaba by a man known as Al-Khuza'i, from the tribe of Al-Khuza'a. Amr bin Al-Aws Al-Khuza'i, or something like that, was his name was. He traveled to a location, he went to a certain place up in north, where he found people extremely well established, so-called civilized, with so much monetary strength and flexibility and all the things. So he was so impressed by the lifestyles of these individuals that he asked, how did you achieve all of this? They say, we worship Hubal and he gave us this. That was the door. When we leave Islam, when we leave Allah and His Rasul, humiliation will come towards us. Humiliation will come towards us. So anyways, it was the time prior to, of course, the teachings of the Prophet of Allah ﷺ, that the individuals were on the climax of ignorance and Jahiliyyah. To an extent that they used to lick the blood of their enemies, which is a famous incident of Hinda herself, that she actually had paid Wahshi radiallahu anhu, and of course who accepted Islam afterwards, to assassinate the 3 individuals or any one of them, that either Rasulullah ﷺ, either Ali ibn Abi Talib or Hamza radiallahu anhu, in which he was able to attack Hamza radiallahu anhu, and when he was killed, when Hamza radiallahu anhu became a shaheed, his body was cut, he was mutilated into pieces, and she took out the liver and she bit it. And she bit the liver. This was the climax of ignorance in Jahiliyyah. A companion came to the Prophet ﷺ and he began to cry and weep. And he said, oh, the Nabi of Allah, indeed I have committed such a heinous act. Will Allah forgive me? The Prophet ﷺ said, you accepted Islam? You accepted Iman? He said, of course I did. He said, Allah will forgive you. He said, oh Prophet of Allah, I have committed such an act that I don't think I will be forgiven. He said, Allah will forgive you. He began to cry and said, oh Prophet of Allah, I am afraid that I will not be forgiven. He said, what happened? He said, I have buried 12 of my own daughters with my own hand, Ya Rasul. I have buried 12 of my own daughters with my own hand, Ya Rasul. That when one of my daughters was born, my wife told me that she had died while I was not even present at the time of her birth, while she had hid my daughter in the neighborhood, and she was taking care of her over days.
and she was hiding. Being a mother, she cared for the child, and she knew that if I would find out, that I would kill this daughter. And slowly this girl became attached, and she would come to our house more often because she was our daughter. I did not even know this. I became more inclined and started loving this child to an extent that when my wife thought that I'm truly inspired and I'm really loving this child now, so she disclosed the information and said, "Do you need to know something?" He said, "Yes." He says, "That's your own daughter. That because of the fear of yours while you were traveling when I gave birth to the child, I had given this to the neighbors so they can be protected and preserved, and you do not take the life of this child." He said, "With all of that, I took my own child to the outskirts of Mecca. I dug a hole in a grave for my own daughter. While the dirt is coming upon me, she's wiping the dirt off of myself, and she's saying, 'Abu, Abu, my father, my father,' and I buried her alive, Ya Rasul. I buried her alive, Ya Rasul." The climax of ignorance and jahiliyyah. The climax of ignorance and jahiliyyah. Licking the blood of their enemies. Burying their daughters alive. Treating others unjustly. There was no aspect of justice and adl. There was no words of adl and justice in the lives of those individuals. There were those who would take anything from anyone. The drinking of the camel prior to the other individuals, or someone taking something before them, would wage wars for centuries amongst them with tribes after tribes after tribes. Khadija radiallahu anha herself reports that two of her husbands prior to Rasulullah were both killed because of tribal wars. And she had decided not to get married anymore. So tribal wars and fights and feuds. But what changed this nation? What made these individuals such people that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had to say, وَالسَّابِقُونَ الْأَوَّلُونَ مِنَ الْمُهَاجِرِينَ وَالْأَنصَارِ وَالَّذِينَ اتَّبَعُوهُم بِالْإِحْسَانِ رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنْهُمْ وَرَضُوا عَنْهُ. What made them Muhajirin and Ansar? What made them the individuals who reached that place? And brothers and sisters, it was the slavery and the service of Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Zayd radiallahu anhu was a young child. I'm not going to go into the details of it. Zayd radiallahu anhu was a young child. He was born in a family of a person, Zayd bin Haris. His father's name was Haris. The mother's tribe, the father tribes got into a little argument. The mother took this child to her father's house. The tribes between the husband and wife became much more further. So now the uncles, the maternal uncles of Zayd radiallahu anhu had taken their own nephew and they sold him in the markets of Medina just to take revenge from the father and their family. So this child was sold. His name was Zayd. He came into the areas of Mecca, in the places, in the areas of Mecca, and was sold. When he was sold to the uncle of Khadija radiallahu anha. When she became married, she was given as a gift, as a servant, as Zayd radiallahu anhu. Then when Rasulullah got married to Khadija radiallahu anha, she had given Zayd radiallahu anha for the service to the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Long story short, after a long hajj, the father and the uncle came looking for the son. They found Zayd radiallahu anhu. They said, "Oh Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this child is ours. We need to take him back." The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "If you're telling the truth, then this child is yours without any money. You don't have to give me any money. But if the child doesn't want to go back with you, I'm not going to force this child." The child grew up with the Prophet of Allah. He was 6 to 7 years of age when he was gifted the Prophet as a servant. So at this moment, the Prophet said, "If he wants to go back, I will charge you no money. That's your son. That's your own blood. Why would I even ask you for any money? And if this child doesn't want to go, I'm sorry, I'm not going to push him." So the Prophet of Allah called Zayd radiallahu anhu and said, "Zayd, who are these two men?" He said, "O Prophet of Allah, that's my father Haris. And that's my paternal uncle, my chacha, my father's younger brother." The Prophet of Allah said, "They have come to take you. Would you go with them?" He said, "O Prophet of Allah, I would prefer the slavery of yours over freedom of life with my father and my uncle. That indeed I find a father, an uncle, a friend, and all the world, the entire globe inside of you, O Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam." What made Sahaba was the service of the Prophet of Allah, the relationship with the Prophet ﷺ. And that's what the word Sahaba itself means, that we mentioned in the beginning of our program, that what made Sahaba was the relation with the Prophet of Allah ﷺ. The word Sahaba comes from Sahba, which means relationship with the Prophet of Allah ﷺ. And these were those individuals who reached such climax on the face of this earth that Rasulullah ﷺ mentioned to the Sahaba. And wallahi, last few days back, I was in one of the masjids in Long Island, Masjid Noor. We started a new series there called The Forgotten Treasures from amongst the life of Tabi'un. So I was mentioning to them a hadith al-Qudsi of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu. The hadith al-Qudsi itself mentions, and of course there's details of what hadith al-Qudsi is, but not time to discuss at the moment. So the hadith mentions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that there are certain attributes from amongst the slave of Allah that Allah loves. There are certain attributes and qualities within the people that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves. Amongst them are those that these people are unknown, that they are unknown. These individuals are not known to people. Second, that if they were to intercede for someone, their intercession would hold no weight in the eyes of people. And if they were to go and they were to ask someone for marriage, they would not be accepted. If they were present, no one knows their presence. And if they were to leave, no one would see them leave. Meaning they were nothing. They were not known to them. And if they were to leave this world, very few would cry over them. Very few would cry over them. And then the Prophet of Allah ﷺ said, لَوْ أَقْسَمَ عَلَى اللَّهِ لَأَبَرَّهُ. But they are such that if they were to take the oath of Allah, Allah will not let go of the oath of these individuals. If they were to take the qasam of Allah, Allah will not waste the qasam of these individuals. They became so noble and respected in the sight of Allah that if they were to say Wallahi, Allah will not reject the dua of these individuals. And this is what Allah gave the Sahaba radiallahu anhu to the level of rida and happiness. And I mentioned this previously, and some of you might have heard this. Imam at-Tirmidhi rahmatullah alayhi has written a very beautiful piece of work. It's called Shamail at-Tirmidhi. If any one of you get a chance, inshallah, please read this book. This hadith book itself is actually a compilation of approximately 400 ahadith, 55 chapters on the characteristics, the lives, the features, the attributes of the life of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's called Shamail at-Tirmidhi. And there's no excuse. It's in Arabic, English, Urdu, Bangla, Pashto, Punjabi, you name it. It's everywhere. It's any language that you ask for, it's present. So the book is called Shamail at-Tirmidhi. In one of the chapters of Shamail at-Tirmidhi, there's a hadith, which was reported by a man known as Zahir radiallahu anhu. And the chapter is the chapter of the humor of the Prophet of Allah. He also laughed. Prophet also smiled. And the ajib thing about the Prophet was that the Sahaba said there was always a smile on his face, but his heart was always full of grief and worry. So, but he also made the Sahaba laugh. He also had like a good time with the Sahaba. So there's a hadith reported by a man known as Zahir radiallahu anhu. And who was Zahir? Zahir radiallahu anhu is a Sahabi who is a very, very poor man. Extremely poor individual. And Zahir radiallahu anhu lives in the outskirts of Medina. He rarely comes into Medina itself. The only times that he comes to the area of Medina is that when he actually has to buy and sell stuff. And he is the one who grows plantations and farming. That was something big in Medina. So he barely makes it living. Barely makes it. Poor individual, lives in the outskirts of Medina, doesn't have too many friends in the city, doesn't know a lot of rich people, doesn't know a lot of people who will point towards him. And Rasulullah said, for every man who is pointed towards, either because of their dunya or deen, they are close towards destruction, except for those that Allah protects. If people begin to point at you because of your dunya or your deen, then ask Allah for ikhlas and sincerity. Ask Allah for sincerity, that indeed the sincerity is about to lose from the hearts of individuals. May Allah protect us all. So now what happened was, Zahir radiallahu anhu would come to the city. He would buy and sell his stuff. People would not communicate because they didn't know him. He was a very humble, simple, poor individual from amongst the companions. But Rasulullah's love for Sahaba was something which was not natural with anyone else. He loved everyone in a way that everyone thought that he loved him the most. The Prophet ﷺ walks behind Zahir radiallahu anhu, slowly as you sneak, behind someone. And the Prophet ﷺ comes back and he closes his eyes like you do to a friend. He closes his eyes. Make him feel comfortable. Make him feel relaxed. So now when he closes his eyes, now he's he knows that someone is trying to trick him to find out who it is. So he starts guessing, thinking. So when he goes back, he realizes that this must be the Mubarak hands of the Prophet of Allah. that indeed this is the Mubarak hands of the Prophet ﷺ. So when he realizes it's the Nabi of Allah, what he does is that he starts pushing himself back. So his back becomes connected with the chest of the Nabi of Allah. So he's pushing himself back, connecting him. So the Nabi of Allah realizes that he got it. That's me. So the Prophet of Allah, to extend a little bit more comfort to him, he removes his hand and he puts it on the shoulder of his. And he said, oh, the people of the market of Medina, who wants to buy a very good servant of theirs? Take as a khadim for you. This is the servant that I'm selling today. Just to a little, give him a comfort, bring a smile to his face. Zahir radiallahu anhu said, O Prophet of Allah, I'm a poor man. I'm an individual who has no worth. People don't even know me. O Prophet of Allah, you won't even get qarareen, you won't even get pennies out of me. It was a man like Abu Bakr and Umar and Uthman and Ali, and of course the giants of those, you would get so much, Ya Rasulullah. I'm a man who is unknown to people. O Prophet of Allah, what would you get out of me? What was the reply of the Prophet ﷺ? The Nabi of Allah ﷺ said, O Zahir, hadith of Shama'il al-Tirmidhi, in the chapter of Bab al-Mazah, in the last hadith, it is mentioned that the Prophet ﷺ said that, O Zahir, even though it be that you are not known to the people of Medina, but there is not a single angel in the heavens who don't know by your name. Every single malak and angel in the heaven knows that Zahir walking around. Every angel knows you by your own name personally. You are known in the heavens by the angels. لَوْ أَقْسَمَ عَلَى اللَّهِ لَأَبَرَّأَ. There were a class of such individuals that if they were to take the oath of Allah, Allah will not reject the oath of these individuals. What brought the Sahaba to the level of this, my dear respected brothers and elders, for the 10 minutes that I have to conclude, what brought the Sahaba radiallahu anhum ajma'een was the extreme commitment on the obedience of Allah and His Rasul. And I say this, and I want you to take something, and whenever I speak, I try to say this, that you hear a lot, and it's hard for you to absorb it. May Allah reward you for sitting here for such a long time. There was a sheikh who used to tell such a beautiful story. He said there was a khatib who used to give long bayans, and mashallah, he wasn't good at all, just like me, and no eloquence at all, just like me. He was, subhanallah, I don't know why people called him. So now what happened was that one day he started giving a bayan. So one guy got up and he left. He goes, enough, man. The second guy got up. The third guy got up. Fourth, the whole majma left. You're tired of him speaking, man. Stop it already. So there's one guy sitting in the front with so much khushu, like he's just sitting there like this. So now he's concentrated, he's sitting, he's focused. So now after that he comes to him. He goes, my brother, you are the man of true iman. You have reached the excellence of iman that every man and woman left this gathering except for you. You have completed and perfected your iman to the highest level, that you sat through the entire bayan of mine and did not even move and did not even leave. He said, Shaykh, the way that you give bayan, I would have been the first one to leave, but the mic you're using is mine, I gotta take home. So I hope this is no one's mic, you gotta take home. But seriously, may Allah reward you for being here for such a long time and being a part of this, and may Allah reward and bless all of you to be present. But I want to come back to the level of Sahaba and their excellence, and that was just on a lighter note to just relax ourselves. I know for 15 minutes continuous. The aspect of what brought Sahaba, the aspect of what brought Sahaba to that level was the complete commitment, the love, and the obedience of the Prophet of Allah. And I want to tell you one thing. Whenever I do speak, I tell you to take back home something. The take back home message for tonight. And of course, there might be some things that you already receive from, but one thing that I'll tell you. There's one thing that all of us testify in order to accept our faith, and that is La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, the foundations of our faith. La ilaha illallah, first portion. Muhammadur Rasulullah, second portion. I want you to listen to this carefully, very carefully. It's hard for us to absorb, but if you take it, you will understand. La ilaha illallah cannot be shown. Muhammadur Rasulullah cannot be hidden. La ilaha illallah cannot be shown. La ilaha illallah dikhaya nahi ja sakta. Muhammad Rasulullah chupaya nahi ja sakta. You can't hide Muhammad Rasulullah. If a person has La ilaha illallah, you can't show it. It's just there. If you have Muhammad Rasulullah, you cannot hide it. You cannot say Muhammad Rasulullah and then hide it. Impossible. Because the effect of Muhammad Rasulullah is that it must show itself. That's the effect. And that's what Sahaba had. Abbas radiallahu anh mentioned that I had not accepted Islam at that moment. It was prior to 2 years of the hijrah of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Nabi of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had gone through approximately 10 to 11 years of his life after the prophethood in Makkah al-Mukarramah. He had just gone through the 10th year of his prophecy, which is known as Amul Huzn. The 10th year of the prophecy of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, two things happened. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam lost his uncle, he lost his wife. The two great partners of his life, great support of his life. That was the same time that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam went to Taif, and he was stoned for 3 miles, some narrations 6 miles. That year was known as the Amul Huzn. After that, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was taken to the Mi'raj. Of course, the differences of opinion. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam after that was met by the people of Aus and Khazraj. Now, subhanAllah, ajib thing comes to us is that the Sahaba radiallahu anhum ajma'in, which of course had wanted to accept Islam, they came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and they met the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And they met him secretly in the time of Hajj. There were 6 men and few women. It was the first time that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam ever met the people of Medina. It was known as Yathrib. It was the tribes of Aus and Khazraj. They had internal wars for more than decades, 3-4 decades, 40 years. They finally reconciled their issues. They came to Mecca. They heard about the Prophet ﷺ, and they decided to invite the Prophet ﷺ towards Medina. They said, "O Prophet of Allah, we accept Islam, but we are so weak and internally not strong enough to take you to Medina. Give us a year or two, and then we want to invite you towards Medina." Abbas radiallahu anhu said that I had not accepted Islam at that moment. I went with my nephew, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the next year. And I met these people, the people of Aus and Khazraj. There were 60 to 70 men and women. Now there were a larger crowd of individuals. They came and they said, "O Prophet of Allah, we want to take you to Medina. Please come. Our internal affairs have been fixed." Abbas radiallahu anhu said, even though I had not accepted Islam at the moment, I told them that, "Oh, the people of Yathrib, the people of Medina, if you take this young man," meaning my nephew Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, "then the peace and tranquility of your city will be gone. The comfort of your nights will become into tortures and difficulties of nights. The peace and tranquility of your days will become the reasons of hardships and calamities and trials for you. And the times of ease and comfort will become the times of difficulty for you. If you take this man to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam to Medina, so how do you tell me that you will protect my nephew? What is your guarantee?" Sa'ad radiallahu anhu was from amongst the spokesmen of Ansar. And wallahi, Ansar of Ansar. The Nabi of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, if there was no hijrah, if there was no migration, I wish that I was from amongst the Ansar. The people of Medina, I'll come back to this narration just shortly. It is mentioned that the Ansar of Medina gathered together. They said, "O Prophet of Allah," they thought from amongst themselves that while supporting the Muhajirin and the people of Mecca, we have worked so hard. There has been a lot of effect in our wealth, in our monetary conditions, in our businesses. Let's go to the Nabi of Allah and ask him to make dua for some mal, some dunya, some wealth. So we recover from the loss that we had. So all the Ansar gathered together. And they came to Rasulullah and their spokesman was Sa'ad radiallahu anhu. So they came to the Prophet and when Nabi of Allah saw all the Ansar together, he became so happy. He says, "Marhaban bi Ansar, I welcome my brother Ansar. Come. And before they could say anything, Rasulullah said, "Oh my brothers, whatever you ask of me today, I will ask my Allah, and surely Allah will give you that. Ask whatever you want." And now Sa'ad looks at all the other Ansar. He said, "Should I?" He said, "No. Let's gather together." They said, "O Prophet of Allah, give us a little bit of time." They sat together. And they said, "You know what? Our risk, our provision is destined by Allah. No one can take our risk away from us. Let's ask the Nabi of Allah to ask for our maghfirah, our forgiveness in Jannah, towards Jannah." So the Ansar gathered together and they came to the Nabi of Allah and said, "O Prophet of Allah, ask Allah to forgive us. Ask Allah to forgive us." So the Nabi of Allah raised his hands and he says, "Allahumma ighfir al-ansar wa abna' al-ansar wa abna' al-ansar wa jiran al-ansar wa azwaj al-ansar aw kama qala alayhi." "O Allah, forgive my Ansar. O Allah, forgive the children of Ansar. O Allah, forgive the children of the children of Ansar. O Allah, forgive the neighbors of Ansar. O Allah, forgive the wives of Ansar." Ansar were different. So now these Ansar are telling Abbas radiallahu anhu. What made Sahaba radiallahu anhu ajmain? These are the last points that I mentioned. So Abbas said, "What radiallahu anhu, what would you do for my nephew to protect him?" So they said, O Abbas, if there would come a time upon us that this man Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam would tell and order us to jump in the fires, we will jump in the fires. If he tells us to jump in the oceans, we will jump in the oceans. We will sacrifice our lives and our families and our children to protect the life of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And until our last breath that we are alive, we will not let a thorn touch the body of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And these were those individuals who fulfilled the rights and the lives and the love of Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Brothers and sisters, I want to conclude this session by saying this. You will find so many individuals who will say that I am ready to die for Islam. But if they were told to live on Islam, they say, brother, give me a chance. We're so ready to die for Islam, right? But are we ready to live on Islam? Are we ready to live our life like the Prophet ﷺ did? What made Sahaba was their complete commitment on the commandments of Allah in the way of Rasulullah. There was nothing which was left from the life of Rasulullah that they had not taken. Every single portion of the life of Rasulullah was preserved. And that had taken the Sahaba radiallahu anhum ajma'in to the climax of this world. Brother Adil coming in was like a 2-minute sign from me that, brother, this is a 2-minute parchi, and you got to make it very less. So Jazakallah for coming in slowly, and if he comes a little closer, that means it's 1 minute. I'm just kidding. So now I'm going to finish up by saying this, that we have been speaking about Sahaba. I briefly mentioned the beginning of the life of these individuals, the time of ignorance and Jahiliyyah. And then we spoke about the level that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had to mention was Sabiqun al-Awwalun. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the greatness of Sahaba, that time from zero to hero, the climax and the excellence reached by Sahaba, that path. They were men, they were women, they were rich, they were poor, they were slave, they were free. But they followed the path and they reached that level. For us to reach that, Allah has given us a path. And that is through the ittiba of the Sahaba, the companions of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Follow their paths, take from their lives, do what they did, commit yourselves and your lives towards that goodness. And I promise you from the qasam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that indeed Allah will give you respect and dignity and honor, comfort, ease and tranquility in this life, and forever all of that in akhirah as well, in the ittiba of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His beloved Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that was the key. I don't want to say key. That's the new thing out there, right? For you following social media. Major key. You guys know what major key is? I don't know if I should be saying that. So now, the major key for the Sahaba to reach that level was the complete obedience of the life of the Prophet. And that is something which all of us can do. All of us can do. And we can try our utmost and then hope with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may resurrect us from amongst the greatest individuals. As one of the companions said, that, O Prophet of Allah, if a man loves a group of people but is unable to do what they do, O Prophet of Allah, how will this person be resurrected? The Prophet ﷺ said, Al-mar'u ma'a man ahabba. A man will be with those that they love on the day of Qiyamah. A man will be with those that they love on the day of Qiyamah. The man or the woman, whoever it is as ummah, we will be with those that they love on the day of Qiyamah. And what does love mean? Not lip service. It means ittiba, your life, your morals, your ethics, your characteristics, and your entire lives. May Allah give us the ittiba of Sahaba. May He allow us to live upon our lives of the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. May Allah allow us to practice whatever good has been said. May Allah forgive my shortcomings and all of our shortcomings. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept from all of us, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair wa ma alayna illa al-barakah.